Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. Hey one and all, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. Welcome back to it. I'm Allistair McCaw. In this episode of What It Takes, I'm speaking with the Brisbane Broncos head coach, Anthony Seibold. Now, obviously, the Brisbane Broncos are based in Australia. They are a rugby league side. And in this conversation with Anthony, we cover quite a lot actually in a very, very short time, which was pretty cool. A little bit about Anthony. He was a former player. He played with the Brisbane Broncos actually from 1992 to 1995. From there, he moved to the Canberra Raiders. He also had a spell with the London Broncos. He had 2 seasons in the Super League. He played in Wales as well, where he played for the Celtic Crusaders between 2006 and 2009. He helped lead the club to the Super League and assisted John Dixon in their first season at that level. Following his playing career, Anthony took up a coaching position at the South Wales Scorpions, where he led the club to the playoffs in the club's first ever season. And then he moved back to Australia to coach in the Queensland Cup. After working as an assistant coach at the Melbourne Storm under Craig Bellamy, who he talks about in this podcast, Seibold was recruited to join the Manly Sea Eagles before joining the Rabbitohs. On 6th of October 2017, he was announced as the new South Sydney Rabbitohs coach. And in his first years as South coach, Seibold guided the club to a third-place finish at the end of the regular season. He was also named the Daily M Coach of the Year. On the 2nd of December 2018, Anthony was announced as the new Brisbane Broncos head coach, where he is today. Now, in this conversation, we get into a few things. We cover coaching, we cover team culture, we talk about leadership, and of course, we talk about self-improvement. And some really, really interesting topics we got into, especially the taking over from a club legend like Wayne Bennett, who was at the club for 20 plus years. We also look at his transition from playing into coaching, what the challenges there were for him. I also ask him what he finds, what are the traits are in a great coach, what are the traits are in a great player, and of course what the traits would be in a great leader, a captain. So coincidentally, I was supposed to be at the Brisbane Broncos this week, but because of COVID-19 and everything else happening, that's obviously not happening. But I thought it would be a great idea to get Anthony on the podcast and to have a chat with him and just get to learn a little bit more about the Broncos culture, as mentioned, and obviously more about him as well. So you will pick up that he's a very humble man. He's continually investing in himself, investing in the people around him, and I'm sure you're going to pick up a lot of great stuff from this. So here it is. Without further ado, here is Anthony Seibold. Anthony, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Allistair, great to chat to you, mate.
Now, Anthony, it's 4 p.m. here in the afternoon in Florida, and it's 6 a.m. there in Brisbane. Is that normal for you? Do you usually get into the office at that time?
Yeah, I do. Actually, a little bit earlier as a rule, but we've got some regulations and protocols in place at the moment with regards to trying to minimise the spread of the coronavirus. So we can't get into the building at the moment till 6, but yeah, during a normal, during a normal period as such, pre-season, I'm in about 10 to 5 in the morning and, sort of start my working day not long after that.
All right, so because I was just wondering, the other day I was, we were messaging and I'm thinking, hold on a second, it's like 4:20 in the morning there. Maybe Anthony didn't have a good night's sleep. So basically you're saying you probably get up at around 4 a.m.?
Yeah, I do. I mean, once I'm up, and I'm an early riser. I always have been in some respects. So, I like to get up and start the day with a bit of a routine, and that includes coming in to work early and doing a training session before I suppose the routine of the day begins. So, yeah, I've always been someone who's had that type of habit.
Well, definitely. I want to get into the morning routine a little bit later in the conversation, but tell us about what the situation's been like there at, obviously in Australia and Brisbane, because it looks like you guys are definitely far ahead of us in terms of getting back to back to normality?
Yeah, so the government has done a fantastic job. Obviously, in some ways, our isolation, as a country down under, is a benefit in times like this. So, we've been impacted by the coronavirus and the spread of it, but certainly not to the extent of United States and parts of Europe and so on. So we're actually about to resume our National Rugby League competition on May the 28th. We've been back at training for just over a week now, but there's been a number of different guidelines and protocols put in place to minimise the spread of the coronavirus, throughout, our competition. So we've got 16 clubs here in Australia and New Zealand that play in the National Rugby League, and we've got pretty strict protocols that we have to abide by at the moment. But the government, as I said, and the health authorities have done a fantastic job to minimise the spread of the virus.
So, Anthony, what are some of the protocols at the moment? Obviously, you guys just started training last week. Definitely, there has to be a few restrictions and so on. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, pretty much for players and staff. Each club could only nominate 32 players and 18 staff. So we've had to minimise the amount of people who come into our training facility. That's in the first instance. Every one of those 50 people in that group have an app. It's almost like a wellness app that goes to the answers to that go to the Chief Medical Officer of the National Rugby League and also to the club's Chief Medical Officer. Every morning we need to do that prior to coming into the building, as well as doing a temperature check. And then once we do come into the building, we have to wear clothes that we get changed out of. We need to wear shoes that we get changed out of. We do another questionnaire on arrival. There's almost like a one entry point to get into the building now, and we do our air temperature again, and we do something sort of similar on the way out of the building. And once we're home, we're home. We can't go for coffees at the coffee shops. We can't go for to do anything really. We can't exercise public. We've got to do all our exercise as staff in the building, and the players obviously do their training here. So it's pretty strict protocols, but we can see real opportunity to get our game back up and running, and hopefully provide some entertainment for all of Australia.
So obviously, the boys have been away for, 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, it's probably about 6 or 7 weeks actually, Allistair, in the end. Yeah, so we finished round 2 somewhere around about the 20th of March, and then not long after that, a couple of days after that, we went into lockdown pretty much.
Obviously, the boys have had a program to do, while they were away. How are they looking coming back?
Yeah, physically, we've got a really hardworking and gifted group. I think one thing that our performance staff, led by our head of performance, Paul Devlin, who I know you've had some contact with, and we've got a world-class strength coach in Ryan Whitley here as well. And those two guys in particular did a fantastic job staying connected with the players whilst we were in isolation away from the club. And they had constant contact and conversations with the players. Obviously, they provided all their programming. We were fortunate that players had access to home gyms. They were able to do their running programs in the park by themselves or with one other person. We were also fortunate to have some Apple Watches from Telstra, which is a telco company here in Australia. And all their running sessions were essentially uploaded to our head of performance, Paul Devlin. So he was able to, and it's not like a big brother type thing. It was just more, we could see what the players were doing and how they did. We could see their heart rates, total distance, and so on. But it was a conversation starter for our performance staff to keep connected with the players. And for want of a better term, we didn't want to waste time to get the guys physically fit when they came back. One of the things that we did fantastically well was preparation during the preseason led into 2 really positive performances and winning results in our first 2 games. So we didn't want to let that go. We wanted to get the football in our hands as soon as we come back to training.
No, excellent. Anthony, you've obviously had a very impressive career as a player lasting 15 plus years. You played for some great organizations such as the Broncos, the Brisbane Broncos, that is, the Canberra Raiders, and even had a stint at the London Broncos. First of all, tell us why you got into coaching and how the transition was from being a player to a coach.
Yeah, certainly. I actually did a Bachelor of Teaching when I was a young guy. I actually started a degree when I was 17. I came down to the Brisbane Broncos from Central Queensland, which is a regional area here in Australia. I went to a boarding school there at a coastal town called Yeppoon, and I came down in the early '90s of the Broncos, and in those days, rugby league was semi-professional. So everyone had a job or studied, and I had quite decent marks from school. So Cyril Connell, who is no longer with us, he's now passed away, but he was a fantastic educator of young men, and he was a recruitment officer at the Brisbane Broncos at the time. So he encouraged me to do a degree. So I did a degree when I was playing as a young guy. And then towards the back end of my career, I played over in England at London Broncos and also a team called Hull Kingston Rovers, which is in the north of England. And so I started a master's degree externally from a university here in Australia. And I suppose that whet my appetite to further education. I really enjoyed both those opportunities to study. And then when I finished playing, I transitioned into teaching, high school teaching, and then actually transitioned to university lecturer at the University of Southern Queensland. So that education background and teaching background for me has so many transferable skills. So when I did get an opportunity to coach, I just saw that it was a natural transition. For me, coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. So it sort of was almost like a natural fit.
There seems to be a trend. I'm just thinking Eddie Jones, Graham Henry, Gerard Houllier used to be the manager at Liverpool. All came from teaching backgrounds because I think it was Coach Wooden who said coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. Would you say that gave you a great advantage?
Oh, it certainly has. I think there's so many transferable skills. So you look at planning a program, implementing a program, because it's all well and good to know the X's and O's myself and know about different parts of our game and so on. But it's what the players retain. It's what the players learn. So having those teaching skills, and in the teaching world, they call it pedagogy, which is the how-to. It's almost like the process of how to coach or how to teach. So I think, the learnings that, I suppose I had from teaching, from then lecturing at university. And when I was lecturing at university, I was in the faculty of education. So my role was actually to teach the teachers. So that was my role. So so many transferable skills: giving feedback, planning, etc., presenting in front of the group, understanding about different different ways that you can teach, and it's been really good for me with my coaching.
Now here's a question that comes up quite a bit in the coaching circles. Now obviously you were a former player, so the question is it important to be a really good player to be a great coach?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Obviously, you need to know the content or have content knowledge of the sport that you're in. But I don't believe that you need to be an elite level player. In actual fact, many elite level players in rugby league and other team sports that I've watched closely haven't actually transitioned that successfully into the coaching industry. And I think one of the reasons for that is because might come a little bit more natural to them. And at times I've seen elite players who have become coaches, who have coached me, get a little bit frustrated because, they could do it and some of their players couldn't do it. So I don't necessarily think you have to have been an elite player. You certainly could have been an elite player and make that transition. That's not an issue. But I think, you do need content knowledge. But I think having that, or knowing the process of how to coach, how to teach, but also more importantly than just about anything else, mate, is the relationships and getting to know people and putting people first. And, I think that's the most important thing with regards to coaching.
It's interesting. I was watching an interview with Johnny Wilkinson, obviously the England, the fly half, winning fly half from the World Cup. And he was, talking about transitioning into coaching. And in the beginning, he thought, how hard can this be? I'm a former player. I've been around the environment for 20 years of my life, but then he mentioned that he realized how little he knew about being on the other side, and it was just so interesting to listen to.
Yeah, it's quite common actually. What Johnny Wilkinson said. There's a really famous one of the best AFL players of all time here in Australia, Australian Football League, called Michael Voss. He was an elite level player and captain of the Brisbane Lions, and they were a very famous AFL team in Australia in the early 2000s. They won 3 premierships in a row and made 4 grand finals in a row. and I've had a lot to do with Vossi in recent years, and he's a fantastic coach now. When I see him work now, there's so many takeaways. There's so many key learnings for young coaches to observe when you watch Vossi coach. But he told me that his journey from being the captain, a club captain, a club champion, to go into coaching was quite dramatic. He said he thought that because he was a leader, because he was a captain, because he was an elite player, that he could just go into coaching. And what he did was he pretty much had 12 months in between being the club captain to being the head coach of the club. And he said that there was all sorts of challenges in that space because he just didn't get coaching to start with. And now he's a senior assistant coach at a team called Port Adelaide. And he's, his journey and what he sort of spoke to me about was something that I've always taken, that, you've got to do your apprenticeship regardless of how elite you were as a player.
Yeah, because here's the thing, and I was going to speak about this a little bit later, but it's a good time to go into there now, is that many coaches go into the role thinking that they're leaders, but leadership is a completely different role, isn't it? Leadership is a skill. So what I'm saying is you might know the X's and O's, but there's a big difference to leading people than knowing the X's and O's.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting. I was talking to a coach, quite a famous coach in rugby union called Scott Razor Robinson, and he actually said this to me a few weeks ago. I've done a heap of Zoom meetings over the break, doing some PD, and he said, where the word leadership came from? And he said that it came from, in the old days when the explorers sailed around the world, in the big ships, and to lead a ship, that's where the leadership word came from.
Wow.
When you lead something, when you lead a ship, look, the captain of those ships couldn't do it all themselves. They had to delegate to other people. They had to give responsibility to other people on the ship for them to sail for the the months on end that they're at sea. And it made a lot of sense to me because leadership for me. And if I talk about, we have a playing leadership group here at the Broncos, I give them each a portfolio to look after because I want to make them accountable, or I want to give them responsibility so that I can make them accountable to that particular role. So, leadership is about your actions and what you do, but it's also about delegating to others. And Wade Gilbert, who is someone that I've had a bit of interaction with over the years, he's based at Fresno State University in the States. He talks about, a picture frame. And as a leader, think of yourself as the framework around the picture, but it's the players and the other coaches and performance staff and so on who actually paint the picture and create how good the picture looks like. So I think leadership is not only actions, but it's also delegating responsibility and making those people accountable.
Well said. Talking about the word coach, do you know where that comes from?
No, I don't.
Very, very interesting. It's actually from carriage. So back in the 1550s, I think it was in the French times. So I think the revolution was way after that, but it was when the wealthy people would obviously have horse and carriages, and they had teachers tutoring their kids while they were traveling, and that's where the word coach came up from. So quite an interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me because I said before, like for me, I've always thought about this that teaching is coaching or coaching is teaching, because it's not what it's that transfer of skills and knowledge and understanding to the players. That's the big thing. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Anthony, I know there's many traits that make a great coach, but if you were to mention just 3, what would they be?
Yeah, so for me, I think having a growth mindset to continuously wanting to get better yourself. I think it's important that as a coach, you want to do the very best that you can for the players. So I think having a growth mindset and wanting to get better is really important. The other thing that I think about as a great coach is that you're almost like a servant, or certainly my take on it is that you're a servant to the players. I'm very much an athlete-centered coach, and I think that when I came through as a young guy playing sport, probably most coaches were very much coach-centered, that it was all about the coach and what they said and so on. But I think that as coaching's progressed, having an athlete-centered approach to coaching is really important. And, I think, the other thing is the best coaches make the complex simple. And I think there's been some great research done by a guy called Cliff Mallett on serial winning coaches, and there's some traits that each of them have had over a long period of time, and they're the types of traits that you see with those successful coaches.
Is that a book, or is that just been some research done?
Yeah, just some papers. Yeah. So Cliff Mallett, along with some other researchers. Cliff's based here at the University of Queensland. He's someone I talk to quite a bit and connect to quite a bit. But he's done some fantastic research in and around that space. Some serial winning Olympic coaches over a long period of time, and what they looked at was certain traits. So you can look it up. You'd be able to Google that serial winning coaches and Cliff Mallett. But yeah, there's some great research and great reading in around that space.
Super, just writing that down. Serial winning coaches. And that's Cliff Mallett, is it?
Yeah, Professor Cliff Mallett, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for that. Now back in your playing days, which coaches really had an impact on you and why?
Yeah, there's probably three coaches that stood out. Well, the first one was a school coach I had probably for about 4 years. And it was during primary school. And the reason why, his name is Kerrod Bendel. He was a teacher at my school in Rockhampton, which is in regional central Queensland. And Mr. Bendel never coached at any club level or any senior level. He was a schoolboy coach, and he was a schoolboy representative coach for a number of years. But the reason why I say him was he just had such a great influence on me, and I suppose exposing me to rugby league and my love of the game came from how he coached us. Like, he wanted us to get better. He spent a lot of his time with us, coaching us when he could have spent it with family. We'd go away on road trips on the weekends and play teams from Bundaberg and Mackay, which are 3 and 4 hours away from Rockhampton. So he had a really big influence when I was a young guy as a coach. And Mel Meninga, who's a legend in Australian Rugby League. The reason why I say Mel is because I didn't make my NRL debut till 23, which is probably a little bit older than most players will make their debut somewhere around about 21. So Mel gave me the debut when I was 23 down at Canberra Raiders, who are an extremely successful team in the 90s. And Mel was an idol of mine growing up. He was a legendary rugby league player here in Australia. So to be coached by him, he just had an aura about him, and everything that Mel said, I just soaked up, and I was desperate to play first grade because it's all I ever wanted to do as a young guy in sport. That was, and Mel had a significant influence on me, and he gave me an opportunity to play first grade, and after that, I was able to achieve some things over in the Super League and so on. So I always respect Mel, and I think there's another a really good coach I had at London Broncos called Les Kiss, who's actually now professional rugby union coach. And the reason I say him was it was all about relationships. I learned a lot from him. So, 3 different coaches, but they all had a pretty big impact on me.
Any other coaches from any other particular sporting codes that impress you today, maybe?
Yes, well, certainly. So those 3 guys as a player, as a coach myself, Craig Bellamy's had the biggest impact on me. Craig is a very successful coach, probably the modern day great in the coaching world here in Australia, certainly within the NRL. I had 3 years as an assistant coach and under 20s coach at the Melbourne Storm, and he had a significant impact on me. Outside our game, Eddie Jones is someone that I stay connected to quite a bit. He's I met him in 2016, and I've stayed in regular contact with Eddie over that period. So he's had a good influence. So he's someone that I do look up to and I respect. And he's overcome a lot of challenges, and he's been successful at different organisations for a fair while now. So I like Eddie. I also look to the AFL as well. So as I said before, guys like Michael Voss, who's a senior assistant coach, I connect with coaches from other sports. And more recently, I've been on a fantastic Zoom PD group with Justin Langer, who's the Australian cricket coach out here. Scott Razor Robinson, who's 3-time Super Rugby champion from New Zealand, and Simon Goodwin, who's the Melbourne Demons AFL coach. The 4 of us have been on a Zoom call for about 6 weeks straight. So,
good company.
Fantastic. Yeah, great, fantastic. Because 4 different sports, head coaches from 4 different sports is very unusual to have 90 minutes a week for a 6 or 7 week period like we've had. So, so some fantastic coaches I've been exposed to either working directly with or being able to have great conversation with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I always say don't be a blinker coach. I find sometimes a lot of coaches they just look within their sport, and looking outside your sport can give you so many answers. And like you just said there, you formed a group with coaches from other sporting codes, and you just learn. You just open up to so many other areas you can learn in. But did you see the Amazon series with the Australian cricket guys with Justin?
Yeah, and I did. So it was quite bizarre actually, because I was watching that series as we were doing the weekly Zoom meeting. So it was fantastic insight to see that series. I think I really enjoy watching those documentaries. I mean, everyone's would be watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan now. I think they give fantastic insight, and the one on the Australian cricket side was an outstanding watch as well.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to the Brisbane Broncos one with you. Hopefully,
maybe one day.
Yeah,
maybe one day
would be super to see. Let's move on to this. Tell me, would you say your leadership coaching style has changed over the past years, and if so, in what areas or ways?
Yeah, I think it has changed and developed, and that's probably through experience. The more I coach, particularly as a head coach and the leader of an organisation, you're exposed to different challenges. You're exposed to different, touch points. So certainly, I feel as though I'm a better leader now than I've ever been for some of the challenges that I've been exposed to, but also some of the experiences I've had. Whether it be working with chairmans and boards and CEOs, or working with elite level players from clubs, or even, I suppose, understanding how much of an impact I can have as a leader on the group of players and the group of staff that I work with. So, I feel as though it certainly has changed in some ways, but that's probably more due to experience and overcoming some challenges.
You had a tough first season at the Broncos back in 2019 as head coach. How tough was that for you, and how were you able to change things around?
Yeah, it was quite challenging. It was a tough year in some ways, particularly the start of the year. I think we only won 2 of our first 8 games. So the Broncos are obviously a very high-profile club here in Australian sport. Particularly in the National Rugby League. So there's a fair bit of spotlight. One thing that I didn't lose the belief in my ability to coach, to lead. I didn't lose the belief in the decision I had made to come to the Broncos, but there was some change needed to happen. One thing I was proud of after our group lost 6 of our first 8 games. Since that time, we've played 19 games now, and we've only lost 7 of our next 19 games. So I think we've seen significant improvement. We did make the playoffs. We were badly beaten in the playoffs, and I think if we had been more competitive in the playoff game, maybe it would have covered up some areas that we might not have changed. But I think it also probably was a real sound note to end on because we had made significant improvement after the first 2 months of the competition. So it was a challenging time, but I'm very much someone who is glass half full. You don't achieve anything in life in a straight line, and everyone who, including someone like Michael Jordan and Tom Brady, think of the challenges and the adversity. I use those 2 guys as an example to our young players because Tom Brady was sharing time with a quarterback called Hanson at Michigan when he was playing college footy. Tom Brady would play the first quarter and Hanson would come on in the second quarter, and whoever played the best would finish the game. And Michael Jordan, as a 15-year-old, wasn't picked in his school, high school team. So they're great. They're great stories to tell our younger players, and it's the same in the coaching world. No coach who's ever had a long-term career has not had some bumps along the way. So that's all part of the learning and part of the journey. That's why you love doing what you do. If it was all a straight line, it'd probably get pretty boring. But it was tough at different times.
Yeah, I was there obviously visiting there at the Broncos in I lost track of time. Was it last year? Last year September, I think it was, Anthony. Yeah. And one of the things that struck me, obviously showed me around your facility and what a what a fantastic facility it is. But how young the squad were, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was probably one of the youngest squads in the league.
Yeah, so it was. Yeah, so average age wise, it was the youngest in the competition last year. It is again the youngest in the competition this year, Allistair. But I see that as a weapon rather than a limiting factor. I've signed here until 2024, and I've got a great opportunity to help this group grow. Most of our young players were signed, for the next few years. The other young players who are coming off contract shortly, we want to keep them. We want to keep this group together. One thing I know is the longer we keep the group together, the more cohesion and connection they build. There's some great research in and around Teamwork Index by a former Wallaby rugby player called Ben Darwin. Mm-hmm. And, that what that shows is that the more time you spend together, the better the relationships, the more trust, the better you work together on the field from a playing perspective. We've got a talented group. So you're right. I think that's probably a pretty good observation, mate. We're a very young group, but super talented young group, hardworking. But, part of my role has been, teaching and mentoring and challenging. So it's been... it's been a pretty, and when I think back at the last 7 months, it's been some challenges, but it's, as far as developing as a coach and learning the trade, it's been fantastic.
Well, this is another thing that struck me. I mean, you're still relatively young. You're still, 45. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that's pretty young to be, and you've been for quite a while in coaching as well. But this perfectly segues into, what I'd like to talk about next is team culture, and because I know you're very big into this. Describe to us what a great team culture looks like to you.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, and you spoke about the fantastic facility when you visited here, Allistair, and when I go to the States or go to Europe, and you visit other organisations, a lot of them want to show you the great facility and all the words on the wall and all the fantastic photos around the building of fantastic teams and talk about their culture. But for me, that's not culture. It doesn't matter what your facility looks like. It doesn't matter how many photos you've got on the wall. For me, it's the people in the organisation who drive the culture. And for me, what I did when I first came to the Broncos and what I did when I first I've gone to any club, I've always thought about this. It's what you do around here is your culture. So the first 2 or 3 weeks for me when I arrived 17 months ago was watch what the staff and watch what the players did around here, because that would tell me a lot about the culture in the organisation, the culture of the club. It's action.
You just observed. So when you went in, you would just observe first of all and not start making changes straight away.
Yeah, well, I mean, I made some changes with regards to how we train. I did make that straight away, but a lot of the other things with regards to what's been done before, I wanted to see what people did. I wanted to see, were the players on time for meetings? Were the players on time for their physio appointments? Did they miss physio appointments? How did they warm up? That tells me a lot about a player or playing group. How diligent they are with their preparation. What sort of work ethic the staff had and so on. So I observe, and I got a good feel for that after a couple of weeks. But for me, when I go into an organisation to visit, to learn, to share, conversations with other coaches and other organisations, I try and look at what they do around here, because for me, that's culture. Now, on top of that, there's some things that I think are really important. How you induct people into your organisations is really important. We've got a group called the Clydesdales group here at the Broncos, which I started, and I call, we're the Broncos, so I call them the Clydesdales because, they're the younger players in our group, and they're all new to our organisation. They've either come through our academy or they've come from outside our club. So we invest a lot of time over the pre-season, so 16 weeks. We spend extra time with that group, educating them what it means to be a Bronco, the legacy of those who have come before us, how we want to play our football with regards to our game model. We do, give them some projects. We even do things like speed dating, Allistair, and that sounds a bit funny, but we've got a 3-level building here at our facility, and all the people on the top level are our admin staff. So in membership, sponsorship, marketing, media, community, and there's a lot of people who work up there that the players maybe don't know their name or maybe didn't know what they did. So those Clydesdales, part of their induction is we do a speed dating day where they spend 3 minutes with each of those staff, getting to know them, find out something about them. What do you do in the organisation? and then also the staff getting to know that player who's come into our full-time squad. Because what we want to do is, where we want to take the club, we want everyone in the organisation to share the journey. And you talk about culture, everyone in our organisation's got a part to play. If we end up getting success over the next couple of years, and by success I mean winning a premiership, that's our ultimate goal. Everyone in the organisation has to be on board, and everyone needs to feel, I suppose, embedded or attached or part of that journey. So things like that are really important. So induction's important. The only other thing I was sort of talk about culture is I think it's really important that the players come up with their values and what they value, 2 or 3 things that they really value and what behaviours underpin that. And it can't be me telling them that, Allistair. I think that's got to come from the players, and then my job is to make them accountable to those behaviours and those values.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Wayne Bennett is, a legend at the club, was the coach before you came in. What challenges, or should I say, how challenging was that for you coming into a club where obviously you're taking over from, a club legend like Wayne Bennett?
Yeah, well, it's quite a unique situation. I think the Broncos are a really unique organisation insofar as, and I say this with great respect, it's been institutionalised in some ways. So the club's been around for since 1988. And why I say it's been institutionalised in some ways is that there's only ever been 3 coaches. Obviously, the head coach Wayne Bennett, the former head coach Wayne Bennett that you mentioned. But when he had I think maybe 24 seasons as the head coach of the club. But when he went away, he split his time here over 2 periods. When he went away, his assistant coach, Ivan Henjak, took over for 2 years. And then Ivan's assistant coach, Anthony Griffin, took over for a couple more years. I think it might have been 3 or 4 years. And then Anthony was actually Wayne Bennett's under-20s coach when Wayne was here. So the terminology, the language, the process, how they did things probably hadn't changed so much in 32 years. Does that make some sense? The things, the routines and the rituals in the place have been the same for a long time. And that's not saying they're wrong, at all. All I'm saying is that that's a fact. The 3 coaches that come before me had all worked with each other, had all used the same terminology, had all prepared, from what I understand, quite a similar way. So for me coming in, change management is quite difficult, and we saw that early. I debuted 11 players last year, 8 of whom was their first ever debut for any club. There was 3 other guys who had played first grade at other clubs that I gave a debut to, but that's an extraordinary amount of people in 1 year.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I had to change some things. I did have to change the roster a little bit because we want to try and keep this young group of players together. But it was a hell of a challenge. It's a great challenge, and the challenge is not over. But I love my job. I thought that and I also recognise the legacy of the past. I recognise the legacy that Wayne Bennett's left. He's been a fantastic coach and longevity-wise, he's not beaten in Australian sport. I think it would compare favourably to any other coach in world sport, to be fair, for his longevity at coaching at the very elite level. So there are some challenges that come with that. But the main one was that the 3 coaches who had coached the club for the 32 years had all been connected in some way, and I was, in some ways, an outsider coming in.
In your opinion, Anthony, how long does it take to build a great culture?
That's a really difficult one, Allistair, because one thing I do know, it doesn't happen overnight. So you can come up with the values and the behaviours attached with those values, and how you do that, or that process, changes from club to club and sport to sport. But just because you go through that process and put those words up on the wall, it doesn't mean that culture is necessarily going to be changed. Now, as I said before, for me, culture is what you do around here, and certainly routines and rituals are important, but it does take time. It takes time to change things. It takes time, for people to build habits and so on. I think if you look at some research I read in and around habits, it suggests it sort of takes 21 days to build a habit. So that's a habit of not smoking or giving up coffee, or you understand what I mean. So it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and just because you put some words up on the wall doesn't mean that your culture's changed either.
Yeah. No, I've experimented with that with people as well, and I have what I call the 99 theory, where it takes actually 90 days to build a solid habit, and it just takes 9 days to lose. Now, obviously, plus minus, but I'm not so sure about that 21-day one. I think that's pretty fast, But it's incredible how quickly you can get out of a habit, and especially the last 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks of obviously the COVID-19, of how we've been thrown out of our routines, and how many people have been had to restructure themselves, which is so important. It's been fascinating to see. Moving on to leadership. Now, obviously, Manchester United, a big part of Manchester United, the football club in England, a big part of their success was down to Alex Ferguson, obviously. 27 years of the club, massive legend. But one of the key attributes is that he always had leaders in the locker room. And you see clubs, for example, and let's go present with Manchester United, maybe in the last 3, 4, 5 years since Sir Alex left, is that they said they never had a leader in the locker room. How important is it to have a leader in the locker room for you?
I think it's super important. I think player leadership is crucial to a team's success. I really do. I think success leaves clues. That's a saying that Damien Hughes, who's an English fellow, speaks about regularly, and I do believe that. I think if you've played at this level for a long period of time, there's been something about you why you're able to be so consistent and play at this level for a long period of time. So, what clues do you leave for the younger players? And that's what I get our younger players always to talk about and look at. We've got a guy called Darius Boyd who has played over 300 games. He was a former club captain. He's won premierships at 2 different clubs, played for Australia, played Queensland State of Origin, he's had a fantastic career. But I can see why he's played for such a long period of time. The clues in and around him are to do with his preparation and how consistent he is day to day. So, having people like him and Alex Glenn, who is our new club captain here, and others in our leadership group are ultra important because, as I said before, ultimately, my job as a head coach is to give those guys responsibility. And I was listening to Damien Hughes actually the other day, and he spoke about you've either got architects in the locker room, so leadership architects or leadership assassins he spoke about. And he gave a fantastic example about Ronaldinho when Pep Guardiola was the manager of Barcelona FC. Yeah, and he said that one of the things that Pep did when he got there was actually move Ronaldinho on, not because he wasn't talented, but because of his influence in the locker room, and it was not a good influence. And I think that's really important because you can't have architects or you can't have assassins. You might have some leaders in the locker room down there, or you might have some people in the locker room down there. You've got to move on because of they're going to assassinate what you're trying to do and what culture change you're trying to drive. But they're the biggest influence. Peers are the biggest influence in team sports. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, a little bit the same as Samuel Eto'o, who was actually World Player of the Year as well. I think Pep also decided not to have him on the team either. I mean, these are massive names, but you can see that they're going to be a threat to your culture. I also think famously, obviously, the hairdryer scene with Beckham. Obviously, I mean, an incredible player, but Sir Alex knew what players needed to stay and what players needed to go. So it's important to have that courage as a leader as well, because those are big name players.
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, they're tough decisions because those guys have got talent. But then what you've got to try and work out is, okay, what's more important? Is it is it that person's talent, or is it the influence or lack of influence they're going to have in the locker room? So, I think all coaches and managers of team sports have to make some challenging calls at different times.
Now, Anthony, this has been a fascinating discussion or a fascinating chat. Thanks so much for taking the time, but I want to be respectful of your time, so maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Getting back to how we started, your morning routine. Tell us what your morning routine looks like.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple, Allistair. I wake up very early. One thing I've got in a good habit, I suppose, and I need to as well, is having some sort of exercise. There's no doubt that exercise is nature's antidepressant. It's a great way to start the day. So I try and exercise every morning. So like I said before, at the moment we can't get into our building until 6 o'clock. So I'll train then and get up to my office about 7 o'clock, and that's sort of when the players start to roll through. When we are able to get access early to the building, I normally come in a little bit earlier. And get that done. But one thing I also do of a morning is I'm a big, I suppose, planner. So writing down what are priorities for the day in my notebook. Whether it's players I need to see, whether it's staff I need to see. So planning is really important. But the first thing I like to do is exercise, and I think that sets me up for a good day. When I exercise, I feel good. And I coach better when I go through that routine. There's no doubt about that.
Now, you're obviously someone who deeply invests in himself. In what ways would you say you invest in yourself? Are you a big reader, podcasts, anything like that?
Yeah, I would describe myself as being really curious. I've got a real hunger to grow. As I said before, having a growth mindset, I think, is one of the traits that are really desirable to people, coaches and players. And people in general. But I've done all sorts of professional development over the years. I've continued to do different times. So I think that's really important. I do read. I do listen to podcasts. Reading during the season is a bit of an issue because I probably read most during the off season and the pre-season. Once we're in season, with the video and the long days and so on, I turn more to podcasts in season. So at the moment, when I train down the gym, I listen to different podcasts. But I am reading a good book that one of the players gave me, actually, Jack Bird, who's currently injured. I've got a great relationship with Jack. He gave me an autobiography, Tyson Fury, the boxer's autobiography, and it's really interesting reading.
Yeah.
So I'm actually reading that at the moment. I'll
interesting
finish that
guy.
before we get back to playing. Yeah, crazy. Yeah,
interesting. Especially the psychology there, just a really, really interesting guy. Any other books you'd recommend? Any other books you've read?
Yeah, look, there's some really good books. I mean, The Education of a Coach, which is about Bill Belichick, was fantastic read. Pete Carroll's Win Forever book, was really good. One that I really enjoyed, and I used some things out of it, is You Win It in the Locker Room, which was by John Gordon. And I just can't think of the coach. It might have been Mike Smith, who was the ex-NFL head coach who wrote that. So they were really good reads. When I first come to the club here, our CEO, Paul White, gave me a book called Ego is the Enemy.
Yep.
And I got
Ryan Holiday.
Some good... Yeah, Ryan Holiday. Yeah, I got some really good things out of that. But I love reading, so I'm very curious. Love reading. I don't read during the season as such. I listen to podcasts during the season. I find that a better way. But during the off season, pre-season, I read lots.
Yeah. Have you read Coach K, the Gold Standard?
I haven't, no, but I've heard so much about Coach K. And actually, our GM of football sent me through an interview with Michael Phelps and Coach K literally about 2 days ago. So I'm looking forward to having a look at that over the weekend.
Yeah, I was super lucky. I was up consulting at Duke, and I got to spend an hour with Coach K in his office. What an incredible man.
Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, what an incredible man. I mean, just so humble, so down to earth. One of the big things I took away from that is that you got to stay adaptable. You got to stay adaptable. He said, I've been here 40 seasons at Duke. Obviously, he's worked with the Olympic basketball team. But I've been here 40 seasons, and I've never coached a team the same way. He says, look over there. I've got a file cabinet of 40 seasons, and you will not find one program the same. And I was just like blown away. So,
that's good. Yeah.
So the lesson there was no copy and paste. All right, winning season last season, let's do the same. It was just fascinating because, the sport may stay the same, but the players change.
Yeah.
So
it's great mentality. No? Yeah, definitely. As I said, I've read quite a bit on Coach K, but I've not read that book. No.
Yeah, good book. Last question. Obviously, I want to be respectful of your time, and it's not even 7 a.m. there. You've already had a productive 3 hours, Anthony. In your opinion, what does it take to be champion-minded?
Yeah, this is really interesting. But I think there's some common traits. You know how we spoke about serial winning coaches? I think there's some common traits to champion-minded people. I think the first one is having an ignition or a higher purpose. I read the talent code by Daniel Coyle a few years ago, and one thing that stood out to me was everyone who achieves something, in life, and you call them champion-minded people. They've had an ignition or a higher purpose or their why. So I think that's really important. I think they have to have a work ethic. You have to have a work ethic and be consistent to be champion-minded. I listened to a great podcast the other day from Ray Lewis, the ex-NFL player, and he just reinforced how important work ethic and being consistent with your actions are. And I think the other thing that's really important, to become a champion, you have to be resilient, because you're going to get some knockbacks along the way. You're going to have some failures, and often failures are the starting points to great success. But if you give up after a failure, then you just don't know how far or how good you could have been. So I think for champions, for me, to really summarise that, having a mission or a high purpose or knowing your why, you've got to be consistent and have a work ethic, and you've got to be resilient, because failure is going to come at different times to us all in different ways.
Anthony, thanks so much for coming on to the Champion Minded podcast. I mean, you've given us so many golden nuggets there and so much to think about. So best of luck with the season. Obviously, it commences on the 28th of May, and we'll definitely be following you.
Good on you, Allistair. It's a real pleasure and an honour, mate, to come on. You someone that I look up to and read a lot of what you put out there, and also listen to you as well, mate. So it's been an honour to come on, and it'd be great to keep in contact, mate.
Super. Thanks, Anthony.
Good on you, Allistair. Thank you, mate.
So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one with Anthony Seibold. A massive thanks to Paul Devlin, who he mentioned in the podcast, who actually introduced me to Anthony. Remember, this podcast is available on iTunes and on YouTube. To connect with me on social media, I'm on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Instagram Be Champion Minded, and on Facebook, Allistair McCall page. All books available on Amazon. As always, you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.